Good evening and welcome to the Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from FEMA Region 5, deep in the bowels of the United Police State of Amnesia. Today is February 6, 2015, and after a few minutes, I'm going to show you an interesting video which was sent to me via the internet about 9/11. Haven't really talked about 9/11 quite a long time, but we have to remember that the entire foreign policy of the United States is based on 9/11. And all of the powers, the emergency war-making powers that the president has accrued while in office are a direct result of very hastily done legislation, permission, new powers that were granted to the president as a direct result of 9/11. Now, President Obama is trying to change that and get the legislature to approve a new approval, an entirely new reasoning and purpose behind his vast array of armaments and soldiers and incredible amounts of money, trillions of dollars every year going into this giant global effort to basically secure for prostration in order to be raped and plundered by the multinational corporations, all these various countries, and they're just getting started, believe me. They're just getting started. They have so many more countries to do, to destroy, to cause regime change, to take out the elected ruler, and then get the people fighting with each other, and then they can, and if necessary, invade. See, because some countries you can't corrupt from the outside. You can't, or they're just not cooperative. You know, maybe they're just not being reasonable. They're just not being logical. They're not willing to accept, or maybe the billions of dollars that we're giving them, the corrupt dictator or whatever, is just not working. Maybe they actually grow a pair, or maybe they get a conscience, and they say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I want power for myself, because I have people behind me who want to take my place, and the people are putting pressure on me that I can't take your money anymore. I've got to go it alone. I've got to do the right thing. I've got to start selling my oil, pricing the oil not in dollars or maybe the euro or some other currency. And this is a red flag. This triggers military action. So let's look at 9/11 again. I've got about a 7-minute, very interesting little mini documentary about the plane crash, the so-called plane crash into the Pentagon on the day of 9/11. So let's run that.
基隆河是有涨潮一个情况，因此你可以看到呢，这个复兴航空在断了几节之后呢，这个有部分的机身，机头的部分呢是有埋在水里的状况，而且呢，现在水位呢似乎呢是有越来越高的一个情况，因此呢，消防队员是赶紧的来启动这个破坏锏，要来破坏这个窗户。您可以看到现场这个我们远调的画面里面可以看到消防队员他们。
at a hotel in Arlington, Virginia. It shows the explosion that followed the crash of American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon, but the video does not show the airplane. The video's existence was disclosed in 2002. A hotel manager says it was confiscated by the FBI. It was just publicly released as the result of a lawsuit.
Exclusive, Gabrielle.
Mr. President, in your speeches now, you rarely talk or mention Osama bin Laden. Why is that? Also, can you tell the American people if any more information if you know if he is dead or alive? Kind of hard. Deep in your heart, don't you truly believe that until you find out if he is dead or alive, you won't really eliminate the threat of it?
Well, deep in my heart, I know the man's on the run if he's alive at all. And who knows if he's hiding in some cave or not. We hadn't heard from him in a long time. And the idea of focusing on one person is really indicates to me people don't understand the scope of the mission. Terror is bigger than one person. And he's a person who's now been marginalized. His network is, his host government has been destroyed. He's the ultimate parasite who found weakness, exploited it, and met his match. He is, as I mentioned in my speech, I do mention the fact that this is a fellow who is willing to commit youngsters to their death, and he himself tries to hide, if in fact he's hiding at all. So I don't know where he is. Nor, I just don't spend that much time on him, Kelly, to be honest with you. I'm more worried about making sure that our soldiers are well supplied, that the strategy is clear, that the coalition is strong.
So they have a really delicate balance to walk between keeping us relatively fearful, but not so fearful that we stop what we're doing and really examine how it is that they've been waging.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it. And that we will in fact find weapons or evidence of weapons programs that are conclusive.
I don't think we'll discover anything myself.
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not.
Know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north.
Well, first of all, I haven't lied.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Talking about lies and your allegation that there was bulletproof evidence of ties between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. Was that a lie?
Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised.
Our people are going to find out the truth, and the truth will say that this intelligence is good intelligence, no doubt in my mind.
I don't know anybody that I can think of who has contended that the Iraqis had nuclear weapons.
And we believe he has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb.
We cannot wait for the final proof. He's got him. He's got him. The smoking gun. He's got him. That could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Colin Powell didn't lie.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
Our people are going to find out the truth.
I have not suggested there's a connection between Iraq and 9/11.
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I think that is...
No, absolutely not. What I said was, it's been pretty well confirmed that he did go to Prague and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence service.
Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
Iraq was invaded principally by Bush and Blair. Up to 1 million Iraqis lost their lives. millions more had their lives ruined. 3 million Iraqis were driven from the land as exiles and refugees scattered to the four corners of the earth. Iraq's wealth was looted and its infrastructure destroyed and not yet repaired. The occupation forces deliberately divided the Iraqi people more deeply than they had ever been divided, the better to rule them, the better to steal their things.
Okay, well, that's an interesting set of clips that have been put together in order to allow you to make your own decisions about what our leadership is all about. And these are men who, and one woman, Condi Rice, although she was not in that clip, but she said the same thing, that talking about the mushroom cloud. There's a quote, there's a TV clip showing the American public about saying the exact same phrase about the mushroom cloud that George W. Bush said to the American people. You talk about fear-mongering. This is, beyond the pale. This really is criminality. The magnitude of the lies. But the reality is, of course, that our leaders are above the law. They really make no bones about it. They don't even try to pretend that they're not above the law. The only time when a leader is brought to task is for some trivial matter like the Monica Lewinsky scandal, in which Clinton was actually impeached. Now, he was found innocent. He was not thrown out of office. They found him not guilty. But, this is the only thing that they felt safe to prosecute him on, not the criminal behavior that Clinton and all the rest of the presidents have engaged in. And the reason why they don't put their own on the hot seat is because they themselves are just as guilty. They're all just as guilty. And once you set that precedent, then you have actually reestablished justice for all in the United States of America. And that is the last thing that they want to do. The situation is grave. We have threats being directed at the American people now by the Department of Homeland Security at this very moment, that if they do not get everything that they want, more power, more funding, more ability to surveil without any consequences, then that the result will be catastrophic for the American people. They are threatening the American people with a terrorist attack unless they are fully given everything that they want, all the goodies that they've asked for. This is what they're going to hold over our heads. And what else did we expect? What else did the American people expect? When you have a situation in which we are told lies after lies after lies after lies, literally for years, and in fact the lies are ongoing. They have not stopped. It's not like, oh, the Obama administration is not like the Bush administration. No, the Obama administration is like the Bush administration. Different face, same message, same policy. He kept the Patriot Act going. He extended it. He signed it. He re-signed it. And the power continues to increase. Obama is actually going further than George W. Bush went in his abuse of power. The separation of the powers is badly damaged. You have mission creep beyond anything that American leadership would have been bold enough to attempt right now. And who knows what the next president of the United States, whoever that might be, will attempt. And the last, and we know that elements in the U.S. government were responsible for 9/11. Those 19 attackers, most of them from Saudi Arabia, are still alive. This has been shown over and over. The clip that you saw comparing a real airliner crash to the, 5 or 6 frames released to the American public showing almost nothing, but yet we're at the Pentagon, and yet we're supposed to believe that an enormous airplane hit the Pentagon, and it was low. It didn't hit high, it hit low. Pentagon is not a high building at all, not like the Twin Towers. We know, I believe that, yes, airplanes did hit the Twin Towers. I don't believe that they knocked down the Twin Towers and Building 7. We have to remember that another airplane hit a building, Empire State Building, back in World War II. High up, same thing, caused a fire, the Empire State Building did not fall into a neat pile. Its concrete did not turn to powder and drift all over lower Manhattan and the East River. There has been a fire in the World Trade Center. There was a fire in the 70s, only a few years after the World Trade Center was built. It burned for longer than the fire burned in the World Trade Center at 9/11, on the day of 9/11, and the building did not collapse. There is no possible way that the official story that buildings 1 and 2 and 7 fell as a result of a pancake collapse due to fires caused by them being hit by airplanes. There's no way that that could be possible. The explanation, the official explanation for the collapse of all 3 of those buildings, actually they don't even talk about Building 7. They want that to go away because Building 7 wasn't hit by an airplane. But nevertheless, they talk about the fires. They say it was badly damaged by the debris. Actually, it wasn't badly damaged. There were several other World Trade Center buildings that were far more damaged by the falling debris. They did not collapse. They were way, way more badly damaged, way more. And yet they did not collapse. They had to be pulled down afterwards, even though we have whole cities in World War II of buildings that were bombed repeatedly, and their shells of buildings. You've seen the photographs from World War II of the intense bombing, firebombing. Way, way worse than anything we saw on 9/11. And yet those buildings did not fall into a neat pile and just merely had to bring a bulldozer in and clean them up. The walls were still standing in many of those buildings in Europe in World War II. You can look at the news footage, the film that was taken from the air and also from the ground of the entire huge areas devastated by repeated bombing attacks. So the official story says that the fires weakened the steel to the point where one floor collapsed, and then that started a pancake collapse. The weakened floor going the next floor, hitting the next floor, the next floor, the next floor, and creating a pancake collapse. For one thing, it's physically impossible for the building to have fallen that fast with a pancake collapse, not at free fall speed, because they just went straight down, boom. At the speed, or very, very close to the speed, as if you dropped a weight like a brick. Let's say you dropped a brick off the top of the World Trade Center. That's how fast it fell. And it just went out floor by floor. It didn't really fall, it exploded with enormous amounts of high explosives were in that building, both those buildings. And just blew it out floor by floor, boom, 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 just right down, like a machine gun, right down, all the way to the bottom, on both buildings. No possible way that those buildings could have fallen in any other manner than from controlled demolition. Pre-planned, rigged to computers, very carefully done. And they say, well, how could they have done that? Well, one of the Bush brothers actually ran the security at the World Trade Center. Hard to believe, but true. The owner, the leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex actually admitted on television in a documentary that they pulled Building 7. Pull is industry slang for controlled demolition, Building 7. Yet, the official story does not admit that Building 7 fell through controlled demolition. For one thing, I mean, you need permits to do controlled demolition. It takes weeks or a long time. It takes a long time. There was all kinds of mysterious things going on in the World Trade Center buildings before 9/11. And there's witness accounts of, you'd come in on Monday morning at the World Trade Center and there would be a fine dust over your desk, over your computer. A fine white dust. What does that mean? Well, for someone who's not in the building trades, probably that doesn't mean anything. Well, so what if there was a fine white dust over everything? But what someone who's in the building trades will tell you is that when you drill holes in concrete, you get a fine white dust that fills the air, and it's not even that visible, but over time, over a matter of hours, it spreads and then gradually settles to the ground as what? As a fine white dust. And was there evidence? Was there a work order for some sort of repairs at the World Trade Center in which drilling through concrete was required? No. No, there wasn't. Were there noises, strange noises on empty floors that witnesses who worked at the World Trade Center reported? Yes, there was. Was there strange people coming in and out of the World Trade Center before 9/11? Yes, there was. So what appears to be an impossibility, that they could have been rigged for controlled demolition, turns out not to be an impossibility at all when you add it all together. And to go back to the Pentagon, as it says in the movie, the Pentagon is a secure building, and it was secure on 9/11. It has defenses, my friends, that would not allow an airplane to hit that building. It also has cameras that would show whatever hit that building they could defend their position, which is that a huge airliner skimmed across Washington, D.C., and was expertly, first of all, it performed this amazing loop, almost impossible, definitely impossible for an airliner, almost impossible for a fighter jet and a skilled pilot to do a tight loop around and come in at that exact angle instead of just going straight in. And of course, this is all a lie. There was an airliner that did go across at a low level of Washington, D.C. People saw it. It went low overhead. There's eyewitnesses' accounts of that. Not that low. Not as low as to clip in a very unusual pattern, to clip light poles. One of them fell across a highway right in front of the Pentagon, and there was a taxi cab that stopped right in front of that, supposedly not to hit that thing, and this black guy got out. And they interviewed, I've seen an interview with that guy, and he admitted that there's way more to all this than he is allowed to tell. He said, I'm just a little man. And his wife works for the CIA. She's some kind of a spook. But he was just like this fumbling guy that, trying to get out of this interview without saying too much and without giving up the whole show. But there's absolutely no reason in the world why instead of an airplane, it could have been a missile. In fact, all the evidence shows that, yes, something did hit the Pentagon, and it was a missile. In those couple of frames that were that you saw about the explosion, there's something that flies over the top of the Pentagon building. I don't know what that thing is. It looks like a tail section of a missile to me, but I don't know what it is really. Nobody comments too much on that usually. It's rare to find people interested in whatever that thing is that's flipping out of that big fiery explosion. And you've seen the photos of the front lawn of the Pentagon, right in front of the hole in the Pentagon. Clear. No airplane hit that lawn. It went directly in between the first and second floor in a neat hole, a round hole, not a hole shaped like an airplane, but a neat hole, and just exactly the way a missile would make a hole. So we have to consider that all of our thinking must have as its foundation the reality of the major unanswered questions that have cropped up and remain questions, unanswered questions, ever since 9/11. Here it is, 14 years. 14 years have passed since 9/11. High school kids, freshmen in college, were only 4 at the time of 9/11. They've almost their entire life they have lived with the reality of 9/11. But is it reality? Did it really go down the way that our leadership says it did? The evidence overwhelmingly points to the opposite, that it was an entirely different scenario on that day. And yet, it allowed the American government and the military-industrial complex to get the green light that they had wanted to for a number of earth-changing, government-changing, nationality, democracy-changing policies. They can hold that over our heads, my friends, and they still are. If you don't let us do whatever we want, they'll hit us again, just like they did on 9/11. Bingo. And that's what they'll say. When they're really cornered, well, what about 9/11, they'll say. They hit us on 9/11. You don't want that to happen again, do you? Next time it could be worse. And it probably will be worse. And if they are cornered again, if they feel threatened enough, they were willing to kill 3,000 people on the day of 9/11, and they would have no compunctions about killing 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 1,000,000 people in the United States of America if they feel threatened enough. That would be a game changer. You know it would. That's all they need to do. That's all they need to do. Set off a nuclear bomb in an American city and blame it on, let's say, Iran. Just say Iran did it. They've primed us over years. Years this has been going on. Oh, Iran is trying to get a nuclear weapon. Iran is resisting our efforts to examine their facilities, which they claim are for the purposes of peaceful nuclear power to create electrical energy for the people of Iran. Now they're saying, oh, Iran, by the way, has nuclear capability. They can shoot a missile across the ocean and hit U.S. citizen cities if they want to. They have that capability. They're beginning to say that now. And so you see how the stage is being set. And Iran is constantly saying, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. No, that's not true. You could just say, oh, of course they would deny it. But one thing you cannot deny is that the people, the leadership of Iran would have to be suicidal to launch a nuclear weapon against the United States. They know what would happen, especially because we've been prepping, the leadership has been prepping the American people to accept the idea that Iran wants to destroy America for years. And Israel, even if they blew up a city in Israel, that would trigger an all-out nuclear attack against Iran. Because they see Iran, that's really the gold ring in the Middle East. Iraq was important, but it's not Iran. Iran is much bigger than Iraq, has enormous natural wealth, natural resources. It has oil out the wazoo, and it is ripe for regime change. And I think, you know, really to back off on this apocalyptic scenario a bit, if the leadership and the shadow government behind the leadership that really runs the show know that the American people are onto them, then there would be less likely to use their most drastic ploy, their gambit, their last gambit, their endgame gambit against the American people or against anyone, because they would be afraid that they would be pulled out of their palaces and basically sent to the Hague, you know, to be tried by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, war crimes, I imagine that that would be the least of, they would be concerned about that, slightly concerned about that, or perhaps even worse. They remember the French Revolution. They remember the revolution in Haiti, which threw off the oppressors. Haiti's paid the price for that revolution ever since. Ever since. These families that pass their power from generation to generation, they have long memories. And they learn from the past, and they try to incorporate that into their thinking. Now, it looks very possible that the two contenders for the President of the United States will be Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush. And this is catastrophic for the American people, because you don't have a choice at all. I was going to say you have two choices. You only have two choices. You don't have any choice. Both candidates are going to follow the playbook that has been laid out really before 2001 in order to bring in their grand vision for the 21st century, to bring it to fruition in all its glory, and all its maniacal grandiosity. I mean, it's beyond belief, their dreams. They have no limit to their dreams of greed and power and wealth. Both are now established political families. The Bush family's been around longer than the Clinton family, but we have to remember that the Bush family considers that the Clinton family to be an offshoot of their family. Bill Clinton and George W. Bush are like this. They are like brothers. They hang out together. George W. Bush has actually called Hillary Clinton his sister-in-law. And so it goes without saying that there is a connection between those two families. George W. Bush's father, Herbert Walker Bush, is considered by Bill Clinton to be a mentor and a father figure. And therefore, we can clearly see that no matter who gets into the White House, it's going to be both the Bushes and the Clintons that run the show. Again, continuing to run the show. And it was a great thing that, Barack Obama, the first black president, we had a black president in the United States. It was a wonderful thing. It made Americans feel proud that they'd done that. And it told the world that America had gone past a lot of those issues of race that had plagued it for centuries. Black people were thrilled. They were in heaven. And now look at them. Now look at how disillusioned they are, many of them, with Barack Obama's performance. What has he done for the African American? Virtually nothing. Virtually nothing. He doesn't identify with them. He pretends to. He puts on a little bit of that black attitude or accent or just that blackness. He increases it whenever he speaks to them in public. I've seen him do that. But when he's talking to his buddies, his white buddies, he doesn't do that. He's the sophisticated, urbane, well-educated lawyer that he is, which is what he really is. And so there's a phoniness about, we've seen this before, nothing new here, nothing new here. But this is the point that the American people have reached, and what do we do? What do we do about it? There's not a lot we can do. What can we do? You can just, could you sit, there's got to be alternative candidates. There will be alternative candidates. There probably will be some guys out there that actually would turn this country around if enough people voted for them. You'd have to have a landslide. These minor little parties, these small parties, but how do you break a monopoly which has an iron grip on the entire system from top to bottom? I have no idea. The only option that I see is just that people have to educate themselves. They have to find out for themselves. They have to not take other people's word for it. They have to look at the video evidence, at the witnesses, at all the evidence, and make up their own mind. Do research. Stop watching mindless entertainment, but look at the big show. This is the big show, the real show. This is the mystery of life as it presents itself in all its complexity and intrigue. You talk about intrigue, oh my gosh. It's way more complicated than a John le Carré spy novel. It has all the earmarks of, well, even more than a John le Carré spy novel. It's more like a James Bond novel, is what it really is, in a way. And James Bond novels, if you read them, some of them are a bit absurd. Some of them are pretty accurate. From Russia with Love was more toned down, and he did a lot of research about spies, and Ian Fleming actually was a spy himself. I mean, he was like the deputy director of the naval intelligence in Britain during World War II. So he had a lot of knowledge about what he was talking about. And he is supposed to have based James Bond on, quote, commando types that he met during the war. The strange thing about it is that he once defended his novels by saying that every one of the scenarios that I built my novels on were either actual scenarios that were played out as a possibility. They were thought about. They were discussed as possibilities and played out, sort of gamed out. And that's how you decide what you're going to do in case this happens, in case that happens. And one of them, for instance, is Thunderball. The idea that a criminal group could steal a nuclear warhead and then use it as a bargaining chip or a threat to hold over people's head unless they're paid a huge amount of money. And of course, this is made into the movie, and we think, ha, 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 this is so hilarious, that could never happen. But actually, in reality, a number of nuclear warheads really have disappeared. And so who knows who has those? And is it a criminal group? Is it a government that we don't think has a nuclear weapon but actually does have a nuclear weapon and they're just waiting to use it? In this world that we live in today, it's more likely that a nuclear weapon would be used as a bargaining chip in order to prevent the military-industrial complex from attacking you. Then they would be held for money. It's really about survival. It's not about the greed of criminals. For these people who have these nuclear weapons, it's really about survival. That's really the reality of it. They don't want to use them, but it's mutual assured destruction. If you destroy us, we'll destroy you. This is the world we've been living in for almost my entire adult life, and almost everybody's entire adult life who's under 70. So, I mean, we've got to consider that these scenarios do happen. On one level, they're happening. There's nuclear brinkmanship happening all the time. We had that close call in 1963 with the Cuban Missile Crisis, in which there was a potential for a nuclear exchange. I think now, I mean, people are really tired of war in the world. Most people have evolved beyond the necessity of war, but yet the war machine is in place, and they're not about to give up their preeminent place in society. And it permeates through it. It's a corrupting influence in society all the way through, from the military men themselves to the politicians who owe their cushy positions to the fact that they bring home the bacon for the factories that make the weapons in their state or their district. And so therefore they are reelected over and over and over again because they're constantly able to secure that funding. And ultimately they don't even care if that particular weapon, let's say, that's being manufactured in their district is really useful or necessary. They want to continue to make that weapon because it provides jobs for their people, and it secures their position so they can have their whole life, their career, their long career, without being kicked out early and having to go back to being a lawyer or whatever it is that they do, or a farmer. And so therefore, it's a self-perpetuating war machine. It gets to that point. It's an enormous juggernaut, like an ocean liner, heading towards an iceberg, and you can't turn it fast enough to prevent hitting the iceberg. And in a way, you have to say, well, only God can get us out of this. Only some divine intervention. And maybe that's what we should do, and hope that there can be some kind of saving grace that comes from humbling ourselves at the feet of the divine. What else can you say at this point? Kurt Vonnegut talks about this. He was pretty much an atheist, but for him it was like poetry is what, and poetry to me is the most spiritual form of writing. It's like writing a song, or even higher than the level of a song. It is a song. It's a very high level of creativity. And it's like poetry is what you do. You write a poem about something when you're helpless, when you're hopeless, when you don't see any chance to overcome this adversity any other way. And so what do? You write a poem about it. And it's sad and beautiful and moving, and hopefully will spark that inner place of compensation, of resolution, of fulfillment, of peace inside of a human being, and allow that person who hears that poem to relax a little bit, and their fear melts away. It was interesting in that video that I think it was Jon Stewart was briefly there talking about how the government treads a very narrow little path, it's a razor's edge that they're walking, of keeping the American people in a state of fear so that they would be able to manipulate the American people, but not to such a level of fear that the American people will actually start to question the real story. What is going on here? Why are there all these anomalies? Why are you not answering our questions? Why are you not giving us the information that we ask for? If you notice, as the video mentioned, that very grainy brief clip of the explosion taken from the security camera in the hotel in front of the Pentagon, it required a lawsuit to get the government to release that tiny little clip, which essentially shows nothing. It doesn't show an airplane. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that was why the government didn't want to release it, and they required a lawsuit, because it doesn't show an airplane. You see what I'm saying? So therefore, they don't want to release it. If an airplane had hit the Pentagon, with its multitude of cameras, would have released video evidence that an airplane indeed hit the Pentagon. Many, many people say that they saw an airplane go overhead, headed toward the Pentagon, but nobody, no credible person who was not in the military themselves, just a man on the street, has said, well, I saw it hit the Pentagon. I mean, if there was evidence, we'll accept the evidence if it's hardcore evidence. But it's almost, is the U.S. government wanting the American people to have so-called conspiracy theories about what happened on 9/11? I doubt it. I doubt it. But that's all they can do. They know if they try to fake a video that will be found out, because it's very easy for an expert to look at the layering, look at the actual construction of that video, and they can tell you whether or not that is real or not. And the question I often ask people when they accept the government explanation for what happened on 9/11 is, how did those 19 terrorists get NORAD to stand down? Now, people forget about NORAD. We don't ever hear much about NORAD. We used to hear a lot about it. When I was growing up, it was NORAD, NORAD, NORAD. They made movies about NORAD, like Dr. Strangelove, and there was a couple of other scenarios in which there was a nuclear strike, accidentally maybe, or big bombers coming toward the United States from Russia, in the Soviet Union, and NORAD. On 9/11, nothing. Nothing. It was as if NORAD didn't even exist. And the American people had not spent hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, to protect them for decades over just such an event that happened on 9/11. And yet on 9/11, nothing. Nothing. They have buried missiles, defensive missiles, all over Washington that could just pop up, and they could have taken out that airline when it approached the Pentagon airliner. But they didn't. They didn't even appear at all. And they have Air Force jets all over the place. Well, most of those jets were gone. They were gone on that day on 9/11. Where were they? They were doing drills, more than one, about the very same scenario that actually happened on 9/11. What are the chances of that happening by accident? Yes, there were drills going on 9/11 about airplanes being hijacked and flown into government buildings. And there's even a quote from that is often played of an airline official asking, is this real world or simulated? He was just told about somebody's hijacked an airline and they're heading it toward New York. Is this real or simulated? Because he knew there was a drill. There was more than one drill. He knew something was going on, and he had to ask that question. But they don't want us to know that. They don't want us to think about that. And this is a scenario that they use over and over. It's not just the first time that they've run drills and the same thing. Boston Marathon, there was a bomb squad right there at the finish line. They were running a drill on that day at the exact same place, at the exact same time that the real bombs, supposedly real bombs, went off. Same thing on the 7/7 bombing in London, the famous, the British 9/11. Now we've had the French 9/11 with the Charlie Hebdo, very, very suspicious attack against free speech. Well, that's really about all I have for today. So sleep well and have a great weekend.